So knowledge of women have always been at the center of this struggle of being appropriated, utilized, and used by the powerful institutions. So when you bring that into the tradition from Mesopotamia to the witch hunting in Europe, you see that there are thousands of years of women's knowledge, and our goal is to value it, put it at the very center of a new political subjectivity that, again, doesn't have to be limited to the notion of a biologically born female, but the identification with this form of knowledge.
Then, first of all, thanks for taking the time. Welcome to our interview. And maybe first you can introduce yourself and your work, and maybe also open a little bit why and when did you join the Academy? What was your motivation?
Yes, hi, my name is Laura Fantone. I'm interested in, I work at the California Institute for Integral Studies in a graduate program of anthropology and social change. I'm a sociologist. I'm from Italy, and I've always been interested in gender equality and the question of political participation of groups that are traditionally excluded from political, economic, and social opportunities and power. Why I decided to participate in this new project called Academy of Social Science that was inaugurated last year in 2025. I would say because for many years I already been interested in the Kurdish freedom movement, especially in the role of women, which is kind of my interest, research interest, and also the activism. So seeing how the question of women's freedom has been so fundamental in this Kurdish struggle since the 90s and even earlier, really inspired me to contribute and be part of this group of intellectuals. Again, it's called Academy because the primary goal of the group is to discuss the Kurdish freedom, but also in a larger horizon of current critique to Western capitalist dynamics that are based on violence, oppression, and to find a way to put in dialogue the specifically Kurdish question with all the other major social problems that we see, environmental problem, ecocide. So the intersection of gender, women, ecology, and the horizon of egalitarianism, horizontal power was really what inspired me to really think and dig deeper in the potential activist, political, and intellectual fruitfulness of this exchange with the Kurdish freedom movement.
Maybe you can open a bit more for us what inspired the idea of the Academy, like for you as a person, of course, but also as the whole group. Like, what was the idea to start a project like this, and what are kind of the principles and objectives of the Academy?
Yeah, I want to premise this by very specific, unique, explaining the unique complexities of the freedom of the Kurdish freedom movement. One is the writing of Öcalan, who is, of course, been imprisoned for almost 3 decades, and he is a sort of organic intellectual on top of being the political leader of a movement. So that's a very unique and interesting configuration from the point of view of social movement and political science. So the creation of this academy for me and for others have been not just one. There are others that already existed, like Academy of Democratic Modernity, very many. So the idea is that because Öcalan himself is so constrained in the way he can express his ideas legally and in public, there is no access to the public for him. So he often really encouraged across different places the creation of a kind of academy where the Kurdish freedom movement could resonate, develop, engage with other ideas of all kinds. So it's not a dogmatic space where the discussions can only be centered about the Kurdish freedom movement, but it's really an engagement with the rest of the world. And that is something that made it quite attractive to me. Many academies, I hope many other academies will pop up. I think genealogy as a project is also one of these intellectual projects of engaging the Kurdish women's movement and issues with, and their vision with everyone else. So it is in the same spirit that this academy was formed, beyond the current exploitation, let's say, forms of exploitation, inequality of capitalist modernity. Now, why calling it democratic modernity? It is also coming from some of the writings, the Kurdish freedom movement leaders, but also the question of social sciences itself. So how do we consider a space where across different disciplines, Western disciplines, where we can have a discussion that are quite complex, but not reproducing the hierarchies and the division across disciplines that happen in a more mainstream, say, university departments or places of knowledge that are organized according to the existing power structures.
Maybe I will just jump in right there, because you mentioned already a little bit. You specifically refer to a single social science, like you call it the Academy of Social Science, rather than saying social sciences, which is a bit different than other, like scientific disciplines. Maybe you can open this a little bit, like why is there this specification, like focusing on one, like holistic science, rather than saying there are different disciplines?
Yeah, this actually is a very complex question, and I don't know how much I can answer, so I'll do my best. Because in fact, there are many different discussions about this. Why can't we just fit in the existing social sciences? I am, you can say, yes, sociology of freedom, we just need to stick with that sociology. Or gender studies or feminist studies, we can, why trying to create a new ground? So this really speaks to more than something that I developed. I would say this goes to the writing of Andrzej Grubaczyk and Immanuel Wallenstein, who were really looking at the history of Western modern social sciences and how they develop as tools for the state, in a way, to create knowledge about their population. And I would add also Michel Foucault, how structures of oppression and division and the specialization of knowledge becomes a cage in which the social movement can no longer communicate with the social scientists, and the social scientists become effectively tools for policy making. So producing data that gets fed to the state, that gets transformed into policy, and the cycle continues without breaking this unequal structure of power at the basis of the state. And of course, the funding structures of a lot of the current disciplines and social sciences very much reflect the priorities of Western capitalism. So it's not a surprise that gender and feminist studies are always underfunded. Ethnic studies, minority studies are always the ones who are losing, while demography and much more predominant. So in a way, this is a very long and big discussion, but I want to evoke Andrzej Grubaczyk, and Wallenstein in the concept of undisciplinarity. There's been a lot of discussion, especially from the 60s, about cutting across these disciplinary walls, especially for women's studies, let's say gender studies, like why should they be silenced in a different place and not being connected with history, sociology, philosophy, anthropology. So it is a very big discussion that I don't think I can really bring it down to a quick interview section, but the concept of undoing this capitalist organizing of knowledge is equally fundamental, just like horizontalism, democratic confederalism, communalism are other fundamentals in which we are categorized in separated. That's also the idea why we use this individual notion of it undisciplinary social science.
Maybe you can give kind of a practical example. How does this reflect in your work? Like for you also, you said you're a sociologist. What does it mean for you, like to be working in this kind of environment or discussing this kind of environment? Like how is it different to other places that you worked in or other disciplines that you have been maybe working in?
Right. So for me, it's always been any kind of social science that I embraced, gender studies, sociology, anthropology, has always been the underlying the question, how is that useful to social change? How is that helping transforming and mobilizing a social movement? So that's also a little bit of the premise here that is inspired by sociology of freedom, the idea that the social movement are the main interlocutor, the main the dialogue, how any science, any knowledge and research that is created has to be useful. And it is not really typical of most of the current scholars to think that way. We can definitely think of, I was inspired by Antonio Gramsci and his idea of the organic intellectual, right? The organic intellectual is the one who not only emerges from the struggles of a society, but also keeps in mind and continues to contribute, even if they don't come from a marginalized background, to that idea of a change. So the intellectual work has to be connected to the horizon of freedom.
Okay, thank you. And as I understood, the idea for the academy was there for a longer time, but the practical work started relatively new. I know that we were also present at the opening of the academy, like the first event where some of you were also speaking. After this, how did the works also evolve? Maybe you could open the practical way of your way of organizing a little bit for us.
Yes. So again, the group has been active for a while, but to be able to come together has been only possible last year officially. And again, if we want to have some type of consistency between the goals of this freedom horizon that come and the tools that the Kurdish freedom movement provides and our activities, then we cannot reproduce an organization with a hierarchical structure. So that involves rethinking how are we going to do any kind of work, because even like publishing a website. So our goals are really to continue develop the conversation, but also to increase participation and expand out of not just speaking to intellectuals, but speaking to communities, speaking in a way that is useful for social movement and people who do not have to have a PhD to be able to appreciate the journal, the writing. And then in that same spirit, so we do try to collect and write pieces that are accessible, that are not particularly again stuck in disciplinary jargon. So one of the work is important, really, the work of language, the work of translation. And that also comes from the fact that Kurdish is a big diaspora across so many places with multiple languages being spoken. And again, honoring that, we also want to create a translators collective so that the ideas that circulate will be accessible in as many places as possible, as many languages as possible, especially non-dominant languages relatively to the Kurdish diaspora. We also want to are now creating collectives about the artist collectives, so that we would like the visual and the creative elements to be particularly important with the theorizing. In other words, there's no subordination between Western intellectual kind of knowledge and way of writing and separation with more accessible, popular, we could say, vernacular way of expressing ideas with images or songs. From the beginning of the academy, we had a singer, a special dance, so, and a visual artist. So the idea also of connecting this expression of human creativity is very important. So we're creating an artistic collective, artist collective, hopefully will be organized in the fall. And we are also open for people who are interested in joining such collectives, as long as they come with the same spirit of a collaborative process and not with the idea of individuals writing alone in their own little bubble. Yeah.
So if I understood you correctly, one does not have to be like someone who went to university and studied something, but everyone can join.
Absolutely.
You were talking about the connection between social struggle or social movements and science. Maybe you can open this a little bit more, because this is something that in the mainstream, one can say maybe it's very distinct from each other. Like there's the social struggle, and then there's science, which is like kind of objective and like distant from it and not included at all. But maybe you can open a little bit more how this connection, or the role of social science or science in general, maybe what kind of role in social processes it can also play.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a big question that came up many struggles. This is not the first one with the Kurdish freedom movement, but the idea that education has been separated from the general understanding, the general knowledge, general culture, grassroots knowledge of people, and it has become kind of like its own separate value producing institution, like academic institutions, and separate from general society and people's education, free education. So the idea is that the freedom of thinking, something that already came up also in Europe when women wanted the right to, access to education or the right to vote, and minimal. So that means being able to read and write, right? So this is an ongoing question that is not the first time it opens, but that this, in a way, the moment in which social sciences become predominant, which is at the beginning of the organization of the nation state, but really sociology, the 19th century, anthropology connected to the social, the process of colonizing, and history, they become solidified in this kind of nation state paradigm. So we really, I would say that this creates this kind of fake assumption of neutrality, that there is a scientist there who is alone, completely separated from their own community, their own values, and can just write and find solutions. So while this has been challenged many times, as I said, from the very beginning, but also I would say especially in the 60s, and with the critical science studies, especially with the arrival of women in science who did not feel ever represented in that, but also the other minority groups. So the idea is that we are looking to break away from that kind of neutral science paradigm, and in that there's an inscription in many other groups who have tried to do that, and many other historical and intellectual traditions. So it is not that new, if you will, but there is a new connection, if you will, to the idea that in this new space where the Kurdish freedom movement is imagining, we can also think of a way in which people learn against knowledge structure of capitalism and can learn in new ways. So that's what makes it very exciting. I want to refer here to the writing of Rahima Haider, who has specifically addressed this question of the oppressive system of powers and this fake notion of neutral science.
Great, thank you. You were mentioning this already now, like the example of women throughout history, like the example of how the struggle and science is also connected with each other. And this can be seen in the example of women. Now, when we look at science, especially, women have like not been seen for a very long time, have been marginalized and have not been recognized, not as like researchers or even as like subjects of research. In your understanding of science, or also in the understanding of science of the academy now, how do you see the role of women in like science, but also in social movements, like in general? What is your understanding regarding your like philosophical background, or the background that you take from the philosophy of Abdullah Öcalan? How do you see this, the role of women? What is their mission also in science?
Yeah, that's a big question. Again, I think it comes from many generations of women who tried to break away from that being the object of science, this instead of being the active producers and creators and recognized leaders. So again, it's about the knowledge that comes from the margin and what we make with that. The reclaiming in genealogy, I think make it really central that women have a unique point of view, and people who identify as women, if you will, because of these multiple layers of structural and societal colonization and oppression that they have been. So I'm also inspired by the writing of Silvia Federici and my own writing on women during anti-fascism in Italy, and how women have resisted in so many different ways the colonization of their own life, everyday life, reproduction, food, and knowledge. So knowledge of women have always been at the center of this struggle of being appropriated, mobilized, and used by the powerful institutions. So when you bring that into the tradition from Mesopotamia to the witch hunting in Europe, you see that there are thousands of years of women's knowledge, and our goal is to value it, put it at the very center of a new political subjectivity that, again, doesn't have to be limited to the notion of a biologically born female, but the identification with this form of knowledge, of care, and that become very powerful when connected with the environmental struggle, reproductive struggle that have always been part of and central to women's lives. So the piece I wrote is like women, knowledge, life, freedom, going off of the slogan of women, life, freedom, because I feel that the knowledge of women has to be put at the very center. And a little bit, yeah, so there's a lot of other traditions that have already started to do that, but I feel like this is the right time to bring together all these different traditions into something very powerful.
Also, maybe jumping in right there, because you're talking about like putting the perspective of women as like a base ground. What does it mean also in terms of methodology? Like what kind of methods are maybe different? This kind of different perspective of the woman that does not just see the woman as an object or as something that you do research on, but also as an actor or as like a active researcher, especially for the field of like social science or like sociology. What does it mean to take this perspective and not just watch from the outside? What does it mean in terms of practical work? Like maybe you can give some examples, or yeah, elaborate a little bit.
Yeah, so I think that the most obvious examples here will be how women gain ground in the Western kind of liberal democracies, but those were mainly grounds gained on individual rights. So not on the capitalist individualist frame, there are the right to vote, the right to own property, and even to go to college, if you will, right, to get an education. But when you talk about the overall society, the stratification is still very obviously showing the gender inequality is still there, right? So if we switch and think about a methodology that will be about the emancipation of gender minorities and women as a collective, as a communal group, as a horizon of communal emancipation, then things change completely. So that's where I think the issues, to give you a more practical example, the issue of participation of women in politics, whichever form they might choose, it goes well beyond the number of people who vote, the number of people who are elected in an office, right? Many of the European statistics on gender equality are based on that, but they don't capture the collective element, where there may be more gender violence today than 50 years ago. The idea of autonomy and self-defense, and meaning self-defense in a very broad sense, of not being objectified, not being subject to violence, and the question of not being made into object by capitalist advertisement that still continues to objectify the female body according to beauty standards that are unrealistic and patriarchal. And also there's another big issue, which is, from our point of view, is very different from the legal struggle for marriage equality, that really falls still within a kind of liberal notion of the individual rights, while we are talking about reconfiguring relationships, right? Equal partnership in life with another person. It's very different from having a legal right, fighting for a legal right to property of divorce or alimony. So it is really about configuring, that's where I see the practical application of problems that we can work on. The idea of the self, the revolutionary self, in relation to a communal horizon, not the individualist sense of the self. And that also is very visible in the genealogy and Rojava, the way in which women talk about this revolutionary self, which is not really an individual self, but as a collective horizon.
I think it's really interesting that you also connect these parts of like self-defense and knowledge or science, because especially witch hunt was like in its essence also an attack on the knowledge of women. So in kind of self-defense, if maybe in the future we can build up better self-defense structures also in a scientific field.
And you can see right now also in the United States attacks on women scholars or queer, trans, and that's again something that it becomes real violence, not just physical but legal violence or structural violence, institutional violence. So the question of self-defense is not just something that we can think about in the context of the Middle East. It is really everywhere, relevant everywhere.
Because you were mentioning the situation in the United States, do you also see something similar in European countries or in the like fields that you do work in, like these attacks on scientists or attacks on other people who try to like do research or try to like expose the truth really? Do you kind of see this in our situation as well, or like also maybe in the framework of the academy?
Yeah, unfortunately, I think we are in a moment of Western European and North America regressive populist social movements. And again, the female body, female knowledge, the other, whoever is constituted to be non-male and non-dominant group, becomes the object of resentment and attacks. So yeah, to be concrete, I see a lot of challenges ahead. We have seen them in Hungary when they closed the gender studies departments 10 years ago. We saw populist attacks against queer theory in Brazil. And so it's a global attack. And that's why I think the notion of self-defense is not abstract. It is something that can work on multiple levels of intellectual solidarity, women's solidarity in the streets, but also really thinking of concrete ways of transnational support. So I also see as the new family movements that are really trying to reestablish the old patriarchal family. only composed by male, female parents, and against adopted children, against reproductive technologies as a way in which limiting science, using science against this revolutionary horizon is really happening. So the question of an equal partnership and an open family system, kinship systems that are not just based on the legal notion of family are pretty much in the center of a big ideological struggles right now. And the production of science, of women's studies, genealogy, queer studies, LGBTQ, is now threatened, and we have to really put up a system of support across the world.
As I understood, you're also part of the editorial collective of the new journal, Democratic Modernity. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about this also, like what the idea behind this journal is, and why did you see the need for a new journal, especially in this time right now? Like, why did you choose also this medium maybe? Could you open a little bit the idea behind the journal and its work?
Yeah, that's a good question. Why not doing only online content, only video, only podcasts? I think there is something to be said about in-depth writing that doesn't have to be technical and only accessible to the intellectual elites, but it has to be available to everyone, useful for social movement, and at the same time it has to just like we see for some theories that continue to work today, like ecology and the notions of horizontalism. We really want to have more in-depth conversation about how we can make this happen. So I feel like a journal is still a good way to have in-depth conversations, regardless of the format. But we also want it to be on the website, to be very open to short articles and art. As I said, the artist collective, artistic contribution, engaging with fiction writers. So the idea is really to create a non-disciplinary, unidisciplinary place where we can keep working on these fundamental issues, how to overcome the question of capitalist domination, again, women, life, freedom, ecology, hope for the future are the themes that we are really tackling, and these are not small problems to solve. So we need some in-depth, but also certain openness to accessible forms of writing. Please download the issue, come to the website academyofsocialsciences.org, and you can view the content, the PDF contents on what we're doing for free. We have to charge people for the printed publication because it's all in color, it's beautiful, it's supporting artists that are connected to the Kurdish freedom movement. So there are some costs associated to producing the journal, but everything on the website we're striving to make everything free and accessible. Also, our next issues will be about the commune and the commune form. So, of course, right now we are again in this moment of all the consolidation of techno-capitalism, in which all the there is not only encroachment as in the past or the sort of enclosure of physical space, but we're also at the cusp of this, and we're also living through the encroachment of our digital spaces, medical technology. So we are opening this conversation about the commune as a form, and we're publishing 2 more issues on this, and there will be also a conference coming up on this same exact topic, very broad. So we invite people to contribute, to keep in touch, to contact us, and through the website, if they have something that they want to pose as a question to this new editorial collective, we're very open across any place and time and people to take on the question and create a discussion about it.
Yes, we will on our side definitely also follow along and try to bring the conference and the journal and every kind of work that you do also on our screens. Thanks again very, very much for this interview. It was very insightful and very interesting. And we will, make sure to follow your work.
Yes, and thank you for all your work. We really appreciate Jin TV, and we feel like every generation who engages with visual is very important right now. So thank you for all your work and support.
Yes, thank you.